like you said, it also made sense to me why his daughters are some people call them mean, but why they're so strict and why they're so strong because of the two people that raised them.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you think about it, whether it's the Atkins side of our family, the Lewis side, or the Parker side, um, all of our grandparents or the people within our grandparents' generation, like they grew up in the country, they grew up in situations where they had to work hard. They grew up in situations where, um, like they were in the midst of segregation. And so I think it's important for us in our generation to kind of uphold that legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think, sometimes when we get together and daddy will have these conversations with the kids about how blessed they are, um, for me, it gets frustrating because it goes sideways and I don't really think they understand like where he's coming from. Um, and so there's a lot of things that like our parents and their generation have had to overcome and privileges that they had to, not necessarily, I'm not saying everybody was like on the front lines, but there are things that we have the ability to take advantage of that they didn't have. Cause I can remember, um, when I had my house in Central and Grandpa Lewis and my mother, like I literally remember the last time she came. It was before she went to the hospital last time. Because she ended up taking sick that night. I don't know if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas we were over there. Um, but that was the last time she came. But I remember, I think it was like Mother's Day weekend or something. She was at my house and was just saying how proud she was and how blessed we were, and to make sure you take care of this. And kind of the same thing with Grandpa Lewis. And so for me, that's important. But I think it's important for my kids and nieces and nephews to understand that, just two generations above them, they have access to things that our grandparents probably would have never imagined. And I distinctly remember Grandpa was riding to my house in Central and he was like, "Boy, where'd you taking me?" And so when I explained it to him, he was like, there is no way in the world I'd have been driving through here when I was your age. None. And that's the crazy thing is because Marcus and my kids like grew up in school districts that their great grandparents could not have attended,
Mm-hmm.
like would not have been able to attend. And so like you're talking about West Side, and then I've been doing some research on Daddy's school, and that's a grandfather. Um, and so I've talked to him sometimes about, going to segregated schools. And so it's just, I think on the one hand, like we made a lot of advancements in just a couple of generations, but then there's a lot of things that have kind of gone by the wayside from a structural standpoint in just two generations. Welcome back to the BRSTEM podcast. Today we're keeping it all in the family, literally. I'm thrilled to introduce my oldest brother, Joseph P. Lewis. Now we go way back. We're 4 years apart, which means we spent years sharing a room, a bonding experience that probably deserves its own therapy session. From the days we were bunking together to his time in the military and back again, he's been there for it all. Joseph is a true original. He's the one who kicked off the Lewis family tradition of graduating from Glen Oaks High School, and he's a proud, unwavering Southern University Jaguar through and through. He's even got the credentials to back it up, too, holding degrees from both Southern University and a master's from Southern University at New Orleans. Beyond being our family's official historian, which means he's the only one who actually knows where all the skeletons are buried, he spent his career poured into others through social services and education, all while staying anchored in his faith. Please join me in welcoming my brother, my mentor, and the man who has seen me at my worst at times, Joseph P. Lewis. All right, so Joseph, just share a little bit more about your background, and then we'll kind of get into questions in the conversation.
Yeah, I was born in December of 1969. I think it was the same day the Supremes did their last performance on the Ed Sullivan Show. Time my parents was living in a section of Baton Rouge called Riddleman Avenue. Then when I was about a year and a half or 2 years old, we moved into the Banks area on Golfin Street, and that's where we stayed from that point until 1979 when we moved to the Glen Oaks area.
All right. So let's go back. Let's go back to Bird Station. So do you actually remember those times or anything about living on Redmond Avenue?
No, I don't. The, I do remember the move to Coffin Street though.
Okay. So what do you remember about Coffin Street?
Um, Very family oriented. With everybody, with all the adults looked out for each other's kids, and it was also the kind of neighborhood that if you stepped out of line, any adult had permission to get you back in line by any means necessary.
Okay. Um, and so when we lived over there, because that's where we lived when I was born. Um, when did you start going to Hollywood Elementary?
Well, actually, before that, I was at Capitol
Yeah.
Avenue Elementary
Okay. So what grades did you go to Capitol?
from kindergarten to second grade.
All right. Um, so a previous episode, Mo was on, and he was sharing kind of some of his upbringing and living with my mom because I want to spend some time talking about that and how I think at one point he went to one of the schools that she worked at, and so that kind of helped him. That kind of helped him stay in line. So what I'm trying to understand is, so how did you end up going to school at Cap?
It was well back then. Parents didn't discuss situations like that with children like they do now. I, you know, I was still thinking I was going to be in nursery school with you
Okay.
at Mr. George's nursery that was on Kitty Street. All I knew, all I remember is we dropped you off first, and I got ready to get out of the car. Said no, no, Joseph, you can. Mama said no, Joseph, you can't go anymore. You're in elementary school now.
So you said it was kindergarten or first grade when you started?
Kindergarten.
Kindergarten, and whatever up until when?
Second grade.
Okay, all right.
We dropped you off at our old nursery center. Then we went across town to this big outside 2-story beige building as it was back then.
And so Momo worked there?
Right. But nobody told me, so I didn't know until lunchtime. It was a surprise to me.
Okay. And so what was that like going to school where your grandmother worked? Like once you realized it, like what was that like?
It had some advantages and there was a disadvantage.
What was the disadvantage?
You couldn't act a fool and do what you wanted to do. Because we'll see with other kids, it was like, I'm gonna call your mama. But if I even looked like I wanted to get in any mischief, they told me one time, you do you want me to have something to tell your grandmother for lunch? And as a matter of fact, one of mama's friend, best friends from high school, she's deceased now. Well, Lavis, that was her game plan. Well, because she was my substitute teacher
Okay.
for a second grade year. That was her MO. Don't give me nothing to tell you. Tell Miss Betty when we go down there for lunch now. So,
All right.
so it was like I had to always walk the straight and narrow.
Nah, and so because you described it as this big beige 2-story building. So the school, because a lot of people don't know. And the school's been torn down for years.
Mm-hmm.
But it was over like next to that. Was it over next to that like canal by Gus Young Park? Or where exactly was the school located?
It was on the lot. You have the I think that's North 43rd
Okay.
is right here, and then you had the Young swimming pool and the old Capitol Junior. We were facing the pool
Okay.
and the playground.
All right. And so then you moved to in third grade. You moved to Hollywood Elementary, or
I moved to Hollywood Elementary.
okay,
Um, it was a little bit. It was educational wise. It was a little bit better than Capitol.
or why you say that
Well, see, at Capitol, we didn't have any books at all.
at all?
Ditto sheets, and the only books we did have was readers. When I got in the second grade, was readers and spelling books that was handed down from Melrose and some of the white schools nearby, Duke Rock Elementary,
Okay,
and they were like white, white, white. And when they got in back edition, Negro was print
in the book.
in the book.
And so at that time, Melrose was a white neighborhood and a white school. All right. And so, because I was actually yesterday, I actually was driving through Banks and rode down Kaufman Street, and this was probably last year. I went through there and realized the house was gone. And I called Daddy, and he said he had been gone for a couple years. But he had taken the kids over there by previously to show him, and then that's when he saw it was gone. And it had basically had been a drug house for a few years, and they tore it down. But I was thinking, because I was just driving through, but I was thinking like we went to Hollywood Elementary, but Banks Elementary really was like 3 blocks from where we live from when I was driving last night. And it's just so interesting how things have evolved over the time. So that Capitol Elementary was torn down. Sherman Middle's been torn down. Glen Oaks Middle's been torn down. And then what other school was it? Oh, because when I was out yesterday, the old Eden Park Elementary, I just realized it's been torn down. So it's just crazy how much things have changed in our lifetime as far as facilities and the education landscape in Baton Rouge. So talk. So I started school at Hollywood Elementary, and I only went there 1 year. So I have like very, very, very faint memories of that school. So and they went up. Yeah, so at the time they went up to 6th grade, but we ended up moving when you were in the 5th grade. So what do you remember about Hollywood Elementary?
It was more disciplined, more structured.
Now was that traditionally a white school?
It was traditionally a previously all white school,
Okay.
built in 1927. By the time I got there, was more and more blacks starting to go there. But there was a black principal, late Mr. Paul Hardress, and he was one of those you didn't want to get on his bad side because I do remember he did not like boys at all, and that's what kept me away from his office and away from his palace because a lot of my classmates spent a lot of time down there, and it was. But from what I've been told, compared to Daddy's action, he was nothing to fear.
So I think the only thing I really remember from that school is being on the playground, and I don't remember if at the time, because now they keep kids separated by grade levels during recess time. The only thing I remember is being on the playground one day, and I'm sure these kids was 5th or 6th grade, and they had this karate fight or whatever. They just seemed like they were giants to me. But that's literally the only thing I remember from that school.
Yeah.
And the other thing I remember, and just again, it's faint memories, but I do remember riding a bus, having to go over that bridge.
Mm.
There's a bridge. The bridge is still there. There's a bridge in front of one of them parks coming from Banks over into like the Hollywood Greenwell Street area. But that was probably the only memories I have from that school.
Yeah, the big karate fight, that was something else.
Now, I do have a lot more memories of living on Kaufman Street versus, going to school. But I have a lot more memories living on Kaufman Street. Um, and they got pictures and stuff, but, I remember, they having all these dogs.
Mhm.
I remember it being a small house. I remember the washing room being outside. Um, I remember Gail and Doris took us to the state fair one time, and we brought this duck home, and Lily was like, "Where y'all think y'all going with that?" And I think the duck might have stayed at the house about 2 or 3 days, and then we ended up taking it to the country.
Mhm.
Um, so I have a lot more memories, and most it seems it's weird because most of my memories seem to be about animals around the house, but I have a lot more memories of the house versus the actual school set. Um,
Yeah, because see, they you was in kindergarten, and for some odd reason, they kept y'all away from everybody else. Y'all had the classrooms that was connected by the cafeteria, while the rest of us was in the main building.
so I do remember it being like a long building out back. I lit on the I don't remember cafeteria. I just have very, very faint memories of that school. Um, now what I do remember though is after we ended up moving to St. Pius and going to Sharon Hills, like, I got a ton of memories from that. And and I think a lot of times like younger people really don't, and it's our fault, but they don't understand like how things have evolved from an education standpoint. And so I think I was in third by that time you had gone to middle school, but I think I was in third grade and there were conversations. I mean, this was outside of our sphere, but obviously there were conversations going on about closing schools because of desegregation. And so I think at that time was when they closed the elementary school in Zion City. And I've shared this story with people before about I remember being on the playground and little white kids saying, I don't want them kids coming to our school. Um, and as I got older, I realized that that was conversations that obviously was happening in our homes. And so at that time, I don't think all the kids from Zion City Elementary came, but it was a good bit of kids that were coming from Zion City that were coming to Sharon Hills. And so like that was an interesting time. Um, I remember, and I want to say this was first grade. I remember we were at the bus stop and two incidents at the bus stop. One, some little white girl who was in high school, obviously, because she was driving, but she would pass by the bus stop every morning
Mhm.
and she would flip the bird at us. And then the older kids, y'all went to talk to Miss Sorrell and they told her about it. And so a few days later, sheriff's deputy ends up hiding out and people across the street, the Tucson's yard, and they got her. Uh, but then I also remember uh, getting into a fight where I got punched in the mouth. Um, and just all of these things, coming into a neighborhood. And I think even in our neighborhood, like, um, I think about the same time, there's just a lot of black families moving into the neighborhood and white people moving out. And so
Mhm.
we didn't necessarily experience the type of discrimination that our parents probably experienced, our grandparents experienced, but we did see it,
Mhm.
even in our own neighborhood and the schools that we were going to. So talk about your experiences with that type of stuff.
At Sharon Hills was eye opening. I thought I never thought that I would experience that even on the small level that it happened, but it was an eye opening experience. The teacher I had, Miss Clara Wilson, she was one of those that when it came to black children, or black boys rather, in this case, she would assign them to the lower functioning reading groups. And not understanding how things work, I never really paid much attention to it. But it was yeah, I noticed how with some of my white male classmates, they could get away with just about anything, but myself, another young man, Anthony Hawkins, and Brad Doucette, we were held to a certain expectation. We were held to certain standards because I was one of three black boys in the class, and there were four black girls in there. It was just us, so we pretty much stuck together. But over time, I noticed that we were held to certain standards, And even after Miss Wilson left in late September, she had to retire due to illness, and Miss Georgianne Weiser took over. It was the same way. And as a matter of fact, in that intermediate period where we didn't have a regular teacher, one of the kids, his mother, Miss Wilson, was a substitute teacher, and she was blatantly racist. I don't want to say too much because I was in the same class. This guy and I, we ended up graduating high school together. But uh, she was just mean and nasty, and just picked on me for no reason. And one day after school, this guy and another classmate of mine, well, well, these two, well, they were in this is the lady that taught you for fifth grade. I
Miss
can't
Meadows?
Miss Meadows. They they were in her class, so I don't know why they would have reason to mess with me, but they tried to corner me after school, and I got called all kind of N words and what have you. And Reginald Douglas, he's deceased now. That was when I met him. He came up from out of nowhere and just stood over them, and he cleared that, and that stopped that from forever.
So, how do you think those experiences from Capitol to Hollywood to Sharon Hills, and like you said, like it's it was different environments. You felt like because of the resources that were made available, the academic experience probably was different at Hollywood and at Sharon Hills than it was at Capitol, unfortunately. But how do you think that those three school experiences impacted you, like your overall development going into adulthood?
Guess to a fault, one of the things I've noticed is that when it comes to black boys, I tend to be overprotective and compassionate to a fault.
Because of those experiences?
Hmm.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna switch gears, and we can go back and forth with with middle school and high school, but I do want to switch gears um, slightly. Well, actually, let's do this. So, what middle schools did you go to?
I went to Valley Park for my sixth grade year. Then I got shipped to Glen Oaks my seventh grade year, and then back to Valley Park for the eighth grade year.
And so, why were those changes? You know why those changes happened, or
Uh, but I think the late Judge John Parker, he decided to enforce what should have been enforced, I think, in 1954, but didn't get enforced until mom's senior year in high
okay?
school.
And so, explain so folks understand. So, you were Glen Oaks would have been your neighborhood middle school, but then you ended up being bused to Valley Park. All right.
That that started back at Sharon Hills. For some reason, it was decided between Miss Weiser and Miss Huckabee, the guidance counselor, that maybe I needed special education,
Okay.
and I was placed in an emotionally disturbed class at Valley Park Middle.
Okay.
Well, at that time, Valley Park Middle, they had at the end of the year, they had a lot of for special ed. They had a lot of overcrowding.
Okay.
So we got rerouted to Glen Oaks Middle. Now, Miss Elizabeth Terry was my sixth grade teacher at Valley Park. She went back to Valley Park, but she didn't have any students, and she was later reassigned to Glen Oaks Middle.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But for some reason that was never explained, I got left at Glen Oaks Middle, and the kids that came with me, they got reassigned to Valley Park Middle.
So back and say, let me talk because I don't. At the time I didn't know, and like now, Valley Park is just like a holding place for all these different schools where they're doing construction. But traditionally, is Valley Park a black neighborhood or white neighborhood?
It was a the actual neighborhood was historically black,
Okay.
but the neighborhoods outside of it were white.
So there a lot of white kids at the school at that time? Okay. All right.
Mhm.
All right. Go ahead.
there was a lot of white kids, but it was a lot of, let's just say, a lot of black kids just didn't mix well with the white ones. It was, well, it was one-sided fights just about every day.
You know about how many kids were there?
Maybe close to 1,200.
You said 1,200.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize it was that big. All right, and so so you went to Capitol, Hollywood, Sharon Hills, and then 2 different middle schools.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and so then for high school, you ended up going to Glen Oaks and stayed there the whole 4 years. So what was your high school experience like?
Except for one situation in my 12th grade year, I enjoyed it because that was the only place I stayed stable at.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You want to talk about that situation?
Well, yeah, I can talk about it now because both of them are dead now. Our principal at the time, Mr. Honeycutt, he was an okay person. He just did not like black kids, and
So,
and he did not try to hide it. Glen Oaks was a totally different world than what it is now.
so give me an example of how he exhibited his disdain for black kids.
Back then, there wasn't a whole lot for teenagers to do.
You said it was a lot for teenagers to do,
Right?
Okay. Like outside of school, socially, or
Right. You know how it was on some of these television shows like the Happy Days. They had the little,
yeah.
Well, Baton Rouge didn't really have that. They just had Barmacy Mall and Katana Mall. But if you lived like where we live, it was no way for you to get there unless you had a car.
Yeah.
And our parents wasn't gonna just take us out there just to hang out. So the tradition was a lot of the more popular kids, they had what they call house parties.
Okay.
And if he would see those ads on the wall, Mr. Honeycutt, he would tour the campus every day. And if he saw an ad up for a house party by a kid that looked like us, he wouldn't say a word. He would just go tear it down and throw it in the trash can.
Go ahead.
But with the white kids, he was openly friendly. And there were times that, a lot of our black female students, if they got pregnant, they would sometimes get sleepy during class periods and just put their heads down. Mr. Honeycutt or his assistant that just passed, Dr. Strain, would come in there, wake the kids up, and march them to the office and treat it like a disciplinary problem. But there was a time when one of my white female classmates was pregnant and went to sleep in class. They they took her outside, and I know this because I was in free enterprise, and I happened to have Mama's old teacher in free enterprise. They took this girl outside and talked to her and counseled her. But when it was a black girl that was pregnant that went to sleep in class, she got a disciplinary issue. Well, in my 12th grade year, I was myself and Robert Douglas's brother. We were he was one of the few people that I hung out with. And we were coming from PE together. And I know you can find this hard to believe, but at back then, if you were coming from any class to lunch, you had to be past that red line.
Okay.
Where,
I don't believe. I believe that.
where those two were standing. And if you didn't make it past about the tardy bell rang, you were considered late for lunch and you had to get tardy. Now remember, we teenagers now, and this in Glen Oaks back then was kind of like going on a junior college campus. So you had to walk all the way from the gym, not run, in a straight line, straight to the cafeteria. You people on that side had to walk this way, just like in prison. And then there's a story with that too. But you couldn't run. You had to walk. And he and we ended up being late, and we were told to go get TARDIS, and we went to do that. But there's one particular teacher, and it was from her that I found out the history behind Williams at that time. She said up front, "I don't like the way they treat black students here." Now this is my senior year, and this is my first time ever hearing that this was a problem. So she told both of us to come with her, and she got the attendance clerk to give us excuse
Mhm.
TARDIS so it would go on our record. And we went back to lunch. We went and got our lunch and went on about our business. Well, later on that day when I was in the signaling class, I got called to the office by Dr. Strange. And I went down there. Both he and Mr. Honeycutt was in there in Dr. Strange's office. And I got grilled about why didn't I go get a tardy? Because that was considered direct disobedience, which was punishable by suspension. I told him, I told him what the woman told me, and then they said to me, and I was only 16. If if a teacher tells you something, and I come back behind you and tell you to do something different, Miss Tonica, who are you supposed to obey? I didn't know no difference because in my mind, you're both adults. I didn't know the structure level between a teacher and a principal. I said the teacher, I guess. He said, "No, son, you supposed to obey me." And they told me, I think it was after Labor Day, after the week after Labor Day, and Dr. Strange told me to come straight to the office that Monday morning. Now, I never did find out exactly what happened, but when I went back to school that Monday morning, I went just like he said, and when he came in and saw that I was waiting for him, he just told the lady to give me a note to my first period class, and he never bothered me again. So I I never found out whether it was the person that I was with or if his guardians came down and said something. I never did find out, but from that moment on, he never did bother me. But sadly, a few weeks later, an unfortunate incident happened, and in which someone ended up passing. And
You talking about the kid in Mr. Honeycutt's office?
mhm,
Because that's what I was just about to ask you about. So, so what grade? That was your senior year?
my senior year.
Okay, so talk about what happened there, or at least what you know about what happened. Because I was laughing earlier when you were talking about Mr. Honeycutt didn't like black boys, but I know when I was in school, like that was part of the suspicion or the rumor that that was part of the reason.
I still have the article, and I meant to bring it, but for some reason I just did. But what I do remember is that, according to Dr. Strain, they were calling him to investigate some graffiti
Okay.
that he had supposedly painted on the school grounds, on some of the school property, expressing love to this white girl that was on our dance team. Either,
Oh,
e-
well, I never heard that.
e- either she was a Pantherette or a Pepster,
Okay.
but I never knew who she was. But she was a freshman also.
So he was a freshman. Okay.
And I never did believe that he was being inappropriate with this girl. I think it was just that they didn't like the fact that this girl liked him. Because I to this day I never recall any graffiti being sprayed on the walls when I was there.
Oh, but he had a gun.
He had a gun. What they say. They said he pulled it out of his bag because back then all the guys, athletes and
Mhm.
non-athletes, we used to like to carry these bags that were kind of like small travel carry-on cases.
Not a fan. Not
It was an athletic bag.
a Alright.
Yeah, you know, y'all used to put your football
Yeah,
equipment in. Well, that was a popular thing. And so, because I actually passed Floyd on that day that happened,
okay.
and he did have a big bag with him. Ah, I've always said this. I believe they shot it.
So, because y'all didn't do they didn't do metal detectors back then. Yeah, so that's the things I've been I've over the years I've heard people suggest that he didn't do that to himself, that somebody did that to him. And so what was his name?
Floyd Williams.
Floyd Williams. Okay. All right. So and so I think that part of the thing that's again interesting, and I think young people hopefully could appreciate is again, even though you and myself, we were in school after quote unquote desegregation took place. We literally were like actually living the things like you said because people didn't make decisions or they didn't follow through. And so we actually were like being educated in a system that was evolving through all of this. And it just created, I mean, honestly, like people won't like own up to it, but it created a whole lot of chaos. It just created a lot of chaos. And I've never really I mean, honestly, never really talked about like the stuff that you're talking about, the inherent racism in schools. And I would suspect, there were not all, but I would suspect there were some teachers that didn't want black kids coming to their schools. Just like I said in my example earlier, how there were kids who you could tell were listening to conversations at home that didn't want black kids coming to their school. And some of these were kids that I would play with every single day. Um, something,
And then it was worse because not only was I a black boy, but I had the label of being a special ed.
so talk about that some more.
Back back then that Back then that had a negative connotation. It was felt that you couldn't keep up with the other students. You was either lazy or stupid. A lot of, and a lot and it was worse coming from teachers. This one particular teacher, the late Mr. Joel Brown, he was my seventh grade English teacher. He was one of those, he didn't care for African American boys, and then neither did he care, especially kids who was in special ed. So whenever I was in his class at Glen Oaks Middle, I had to work twice as hard as the other kids.
Uh, um, So give me some more examples of like how you could feel it or see it coming from teachers.
Another thing was we got to school because of the transfer portal. We got to school late after school already started, but we would leave early.
Like Glen Oaks Middle or
But both of them.
both of them? Okay.
And this was
Wait, so why were you doing the transfer at Glen Oaks Middle?
that's something for some reason I don't understand.
Where was the transfer?
Choctaw.
So you had to ride all the way out there and then ride back?
Hmm. And the thing about it, there was a regular bus that came to Williams Middle and picked up other kids.
Go ahead.
That's something that I never thought about it. I never understood it.
So I just want to make sure. So you got picked up on St. Pius Street,
Hmm.
rode out to Choctaw, and then got on another bus and came all the way back to Glen Oaks, Zion City, when the school was like a mile and a half away from the house.
Hmm.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
And there was a lady that taught arts and crafts, whose name I won't call because we're friends with some of her descendants, but she's no longer living. She was mean as a rattlesnake. Every time she saw me standing out, and for some reason she had off duty during the seventh period, and we would leave like at the beginning of the last period at Glen Oaks because we had to get to the transfer point. Because we would leave before all the other buses showed up. And every time this woman would pass me on the breezeway, get where your teacher told you to get. we were just standing out there waiting for the bus. And it wasn't just me, but she would say this to the other kids as well. You're just being mean and hateful. It was worse at Glen Middle because we were the first group of special ed students to come there. So it it was a rough year because a lot of there was some like Mr. Graham and this particular black lady, they didn't know how to deal with us, so they just treated us like we were second class citizens. But then there were good teachers like Coach Malvo and Coach Sanders that treated us the same way as everybody else.
Now, I don't remember if you said it. I thought you said it, but I guess I want you to talk about like this idea of you being in special ed or being, recommended for special ed, being in special ed classes or whatever, and then being able to go through college, and graduate and get a master's degree. And so, like, what do you attest that to? Because if, like you said, if people were treating you like second class citizens, or people wouldn't necessarily expect that, like, what do you attest that to be able to overcome all of that and still earn a master's degree?
Okay, let me put a disclaimer out here. For all the female professors at Southern University, do not get offended. I'm just telling my truth. But I owe a lot to the male professors that I had. That took time. That really took time with me and really taught me how to develop good study habits. And then there was some good female professors like Miss Helen Jackson. Um, sh- she is the sister of the lady that they used to own the daycare that we went to.
Okay.
She was my one of my freshman English professors. She was another one that basically helped me to improve my writing skills. And then there was a Dr. Joanne Marks. She was also efficient in that area as well. But I would have to say, overall, it was the male professors. Dr. Lockett, Dr. Frank Rosenberg, I think, that really worked with me and helped me to improve my study habits.
Okay.
Because because it really boiled down to where I didn't feel confident that I could handle undergraduate work.
Okay. Um, so you took a break, I guess, when you were in college, and then you went to the military. Um, were you nervous about going into the military?
Um,
Because well, and I'm not like throwing shade or anything, but I do remember like one of the challenges that we both had like growing up was like maintaining weight. So I know like it took you a couple times to kind of meet weight and things like that, but I'm sure it was other stuff that was kind of going through your head as well.
well, yeah, that was one of my concerns because I was always skinny and having never been away from home before, wasn't sure if I could handle be, being away and being somewhere else in another part of the world for 8 weeks at a time, especially when you come from a close knit family like ours. I, I wasn't really sure if I could really handle that at all.
So I guess what was your most challenging experience like once you actually got into the military?
The what they call the Army Physical Fitness Test.
Okay.
The first challenge was being able to do the push-ups because I was so skinny, and then once I mastered that, then the second challenge was being able to maintain the stamina to complete what they call a 2-mile run.
So like what kind of jobs or roles did you have in the army?
Um, My first assignment, I worked in a big warehouse in Korea
Okay.
where we provided parts and supplies for the trucks and those that was eventually on the front line during Desert Storm.
Okay. And so you were enlisted during the first Gulf War Desert Storm.
Right.
All right. So at any point were you nervous that you would have to actually be sent into the fire?
From August of 1990 until November of 1990. 'Cause I didn't want I really didn't want to be in Korea, but then again, after I thought about it, I said, "Well, Korea sounds like a much better place than to be out on the front line, and especially for something that you really have no idea what's going
Uh
on."
huh.
But it turns out that we were already on lockdown in the event something broke out between North and South Korea.
Okay. So having been in the military, um, because I want to get into like your professional career in a little bit, but having been in the military, um, and you can be honest, is it something that you would advise young black men to do?
No,
Or why not?
take those 4 years you in high school, take advantage of every single day of it.
So why would you advise young black men to do it?
Well, I don't know if this was on the part of the administration and counseling department at Glen Oaks or not, or if it was just something an individual family thing. But it's like now kids have more
Hmm.
opportunities to get scholarships, whereas you know my mindset was whenever they would, on the rare occasion they would talk about a scholarship, it wasn't from someone I would be used to hearing from. Back then it was more popular. They promoted it the Southeast and
Hmm.
the Northeast Louisiana, as it was called, the Louisiana Techs, the, the LSUs. They endorsed that, but there was no one from Southern or Grambling saying, you know, come here, we'll do this or we'll do that. As a matter of fact, I even had one teacher that advised me against going to either Southern or Grambling.
And see, when we were in school, and that's interesting because I think her name was Miss Adams was our guidance counselor, and I remember her like pulling. I don't know about anybody else, but I remember her pulling me in her office. And I was before after I took the ACT, but she pulled me in her office, and so like she was trying to make certain that we had access to all the information, and uh, and I think also one of the things that was interesting, this kind of plays in. I feel like this plays into it. Glen Oaks is about 3 miles from Southern, and y'all graduated from LSU. The class right before us graduated from LSU, and I can remember sitting in class in 11th grade when they announced what graduation was going to be. And I think 10th, I was 10th grade because the juniors in front of us was like, nah, that ain't gonna ever happen. And I said, there's no way we gonna graduate from LSU. That just don't make no sense. And at that point, Glen Oaks, when I graduated, it was 50-50. Um, but it was just like this given that we got to go to LSU. And so I think again that plays into like everything that you've been saying about how things are structured and where we're funneling kids to. And so that just I don't think up until probably until we graduated that there was even consideration of Southern. Um, we grew up um, in a faith-based family. I'll just put it that way. So on both sides of our extended family, we had grandparents um, that were heavily involved in the church, like actively involved in their local churches. Both of our grandfathers, or two of our grandfathers, were deacons. I think they both were senior deacons.
Mhm.
My mom was. a mother at some point a deaconess at the church, and so our parents were actively involved in the church. Because Daddy was talking in Sunday school a couple weeks ago, about like his engagement and once he got involved in Sunday school back in Pilgrim Rest. So I want to kind of talk some about both our grandparents, but also like your experience growing up in church and what that has meant for you.
I guess things are different now, but I would say that for me, growing up in a situation like Pilgrim Rest, even though there were some issues of morality, and I'm gonna just leave it at that, but
You can't just leave it at
you got to remember there's people out there that's still living, that
Go ahead.
just some things I witnessed and I saw as a teenager that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth.
Okay.
But I'll say overall, it was probably the best experience ever for me because it taught me the importance of appreciating when God does something for you and having an attitude of humility as opposed to what I'm seeing now, with especially with a lot of young preachers, they feel entitled. Well, the things that I specifically had to do, I yeah, I felt it was great preparation.
So let me. I'm gonna go back and ask some. And so I get what you're saying about that people still alive and you're not trying to cause no drama in people's life. But I do wonder if because I don't necessarily have them experiences, and I know like they're obviously like our parents they dealt with stuff or navigated things within the church even as I'll say as young adults. So I know that they had experiences and whatnot. But do you think that because you were the oldest and amongst the oldest grandkids that you probably saw things that a lot of us didn't necessarily see and you like obviously like you were saying earlier you spent a lot of time with mama so you probably spent more time with them than some of me and Marcus or some of our cousins did.
Mhm.
So do you think you saw a lot of things that maybe a lot of us didn't see? Okay. All right. So that was one of the things I want to get into. So um and there's some things, but I get what you're saying. And so when I guess my earliest memories of our time at Pilgrim Rest, where we were in a little small red church that it was it was a lot going on there. It was to me it was fun time. Um, and so I do remember, and it's weird because I don't necessarily remember a lot of stuff from school those years, but I do remember a lot of stuff from church. Uh, I remember, a lot of Pastor Budgewater's sermons. I remember the cherubim choir. I remember when you sang your first solo in the choir.
Mhm.
Um, I remember what was the twins' names? Some musicians.
Georgia Garrisfield.
Spears, yes, and one of them was choir director when I was in Upward Bound. You were talking about Miss Lathers. I remember her daughters being actively involved in the church and things like that. And so there are a lot of people that we grew up in church with. I mean, over time people go different places, but there are a lot of people that we grew up in church with that I see from time to time, they're doing some really good things. And so I definitely appreciate the foundation that we had growing up in Pilgrim Rest. I appreciate the fact that our parents made sure we went to Sunday school, went to Bible study, vacation Bible school. Me and Mo were talking about how, even with the grandkids, we had sometimes we would spend the night at a grandparents' house, and so we would go help clean the church and things like that. And so those were things that I feel like were instilled in us, and a foundation that was given to us about being of service to God and service to our fellow man. I've also shared with people how even at a young age, our parents like started a nursing home ministry. And so, taking young people out to go visit nursing homes. And we weren't just doing Bible study, but it's still something that, we taught and that we would learn at an early age. And so I just appreciate a lot of those experiences. And so, just wanted you to kind of continue about how you felt like those things shaped you And I'm sure you had different experiences that me and Marcus may not have had. Kind of grew up in the church, but how did they shape you uh, as you continue to walk for Christ?
It taught me how to work with difficult people, and it taught me how to to have a caring heart towards the elderly. I'll say I think it started with our great grandfather.
When you said that, it made me think about him.
I used for some reason not whenever we would take him to Independence on first Sundays, 'cause they used to have day service and night service back then for the communion. For some odd reason, I just felt the need to sit with him on the deacon board. And that caused a lot of, and as you can imagine, I don't know if you remember this, but back then that caused a lot of strange looks. But that's where it started for me, just following Papa around everywhere.
But and so you say it caused strange look, but I think like that's important for people to understand because again, while just people are people and we don't know what's going on in people's lives. But I think that back then, and I think this is something that was instilled in us, that there was a reverence for church, there was a structure, and there was a protocol.
Mhm.
And so I would assume that that's why people were looking at you crazy. Um, and so, but it was like church was, regardless of what people were doing outside the footballs at church was sacred and people took it seriously. And so I think that that's, an important lesson or something that was instilled in us about, the sacrament of church and taking it serious.
I think my thing was just wanting to be like my great grandpa.
Yeah.
And then and then I got older. It was the same way with Grandpa Smith and Grandpa Lewis. Wherever they were going, I would follow them around. And as a matter of fact, after I got baptized, that was one helping and cleaning the church was one of my first responsibilities. Long before I even got in the choir, I had a dust mop in my hand. Today's generation, they see that as you trying to make a slave out of me.
It's just funny you say that because I think, yeah, last semester, because I do some work at Wisconsinville High School, and last semester we were started working on a garden. And in the classroom, the kids were planting seeds and they were all excited. But then when the time to go outside in the garden, the number of kids that were like, I'm not going to do this, Mr. Lewis, because them kids going to think we slaves. And and the question is like, where do you think your food coming from? So I get your point because like I hear that from kids a lot. And so it's just interesting how over time, and I don't like, I don't know if it's on us to help kids understand this, but it's just interesting how things have changed so drastically over just two generations. I also like there's also some things that I can remember, which I think again, like, they're not all pretty things, but there's some stuff that I remember, being on 47th Street that I think also instilled some things in us that, I think we tried to look out for as adults. And so, so I can remember some situations with aunts and partners or spouses or whatever. And I remember one time, I got in that car. It was a blue Oldsmobile
Yeah.
that didn't have a defrost on it, so he always had to do this when he drove.
Mhm.
And something happened around the corner, and Cleve got in that car with a pistol. And Betty was like, "Cleve, come back here." But the thing was, somebody had put their hands on somebody, and he was going to handle up on
Mhm.
it. And so, because you talked earlier about family, and I think like we saw that on our parents, their families, like their parents.
Mhm.
We saw that in them, and then we also saw it in your godmother and Aunt Bert because that same situation. There was some times I thought she was gonna hurt that individual.
Oh, that was one woman that did not play no game. She didn't take nothing from no. She didn't take no stuff from nobody. And especially if you was doing it in her house, she was gonna read you the riot act. Yeah, I do remember one incident that happened on Thanksgiving night, and it was kind of sensitive because their neighbor had just lost a daughter
Yeah.
to domestic violence, and so this was their first holiday without their daughter. So it was kind of heavy around that time. Yeah, we had gone to Thanksgiving service that night, and we were leaving, and the family secret became not so much of a secret no more. Boy, Nanny was on a warpath. We was like, don't go out there, because we knew what was gonna happen.
And see, I think the thing is like, so again, working with young men and, you know, so first of all, I had this thing that like, you don't have no business having no boyfriend, girlfriend in middle school. But I think because a lot of those things that we saw, and I've taught Miles this, I hope the girls understand that nobody should ever put their hands on you. But a lot of those things that we saw, um, in our extended family and how the elders were protective of people, is why I find myself sometimes being kind of hard on young men, and not like trying to beat on them, but helping them understand like there's no reason for you to put your hands on a female.
Now, when I was in grad school, I was also doing substitute teaching at Scotlandville
Uh-huh.
when Mr. Howard Davis was the principal, and I found out that was a problem then. So it was like I would, take the guys in little groups and try and find out where is this coming from? What makes you feel you need to do that? Most of them would tell me that either A, they saw their mothers experiencing this, or B, their fathers did it to their mothers.
Yeah. So again, I appreciate it more because like we never saw that type of thing, but we never saw that type of thing at home, but we did see it in other places. But I also like appreciate people like Aunt Burke because she did not tolerate it. And uh, Pawpaw like Cleve, like when I saw that man get in that car with that gun, I was like, yeah, that's like we can't be doing this. Uh, so tell me about your greatest memory of Betty Smith.
Yes, let's start with being there at Capitol Elementary with
Okay.
her, and just knowing that she was looking out for me. And then as I got older, when I had to go to Valley Park Mill, and if mom and dad had something to do, she was always there to help pitch in pitch in the slack. Well, before the unfortunate situation with Uncle Henry happened, she pretty much established tradition among the grandkids as far as us getting to know one another and making sure that we got along with one.
But I would say even after, for people who don't, so for I just so because I alluded to it earlier, but so 4th of July, because I will never forget this. Jared was that was in town, and the phone rang,
We was
and
all in the bathroom.
all I heard was Mama screaming. And Daddy worked shift work, so I used to always be worried like something might happen. And so at first I thought it was him, but then it was the fact that they had found Uncle Henry in that pool
Mm.
on Gush Young. And so like that was a tough time. But I would say that even after that, because I mean I have in my head, but I know I've seen pictures of like a little quick kiddie pool in my mom's front yard that was really small with a bunch of her grandkids, a lot of Uncle Henry kids out there. And so I think my memory is kind of in line with that, but more along the lines of just always making sure her grandkids and her kids were taken care of. uh, and like would go to the ends of the earth. Like, Mo talked about all the troubles that his mama went through, and my mom was still there, like consistently, even into her last days. Aunt Yvonne was like actually living with mom. Um, but I even remember one time Erica disappeared, and everybody showed up at mama's house till they found Erica.
Mm.
Um, and so that was my thing, which I think again I see in our parents, and I feel like it's passed down to us. It's just always making sure that our family's taken care of and always looking out for each other. Go ahead.
I think after the situation with Uncle Henry, after the situation with Uncle Henry, the things she did things to at a greater intensity level to make sure that we stay together, because she would always say, "This is something I never want to go through again." Because that that was when she started, keeping a tight eye on me. And at that time, all I was interested in doing was reading Nancy Drew books and going. I think you were playing you were in Cub Scouts and you started to play football, and you were also playing baseball, and whatever you was doing, that's where I wanted to be. I think that situation with Uncle Henry changed all of us in some kind of way. It was like I just wanted to stay to myself and just whatever you were doing, I was cool with that. Whereas other kids my age was out doing God knows what. But and and it was some years later that I understood why she was like that,
Yeah,
because it wasn't too long after that that signs with uneven started to show
yeah.
up.
Who was your favorite music artist growing up? I think I know who it is, but I'm gonna see what you're gonna say.
It started out as a Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson. Then and then it evolved to Prince and the Revolution.
So where the Supremes come in at?
Oh, that well, oh, I forgot about them. That started the day of Grandma's 50th birthday party. Uh, it's from what I understand, Grandpa was very strict on Mom and them. They even though she would buy her records, he'd find them and throw them out. So she back then, this was when the now nostalgic period for the Motown era kicked off,
Okay,
and she wanted to to find somebody to borrow somebody's record of their first album that went to number one. But one day when we was at Sharon Hills, we came home, and I and the bedroom that was the original the guest bedroom also had a record player in it. And that's when I found out that Diana Ross was old, a year older than Daddy, I'll say, because that was the first time I saw one of their albums. It was the "Where Did Our Love Go" album that went to number one. It went straight to number one. They all had on green dresses or pale blue dresses, and that's where my fascination with them started.
and so the reason I asked that, and this is the part that I don't think your nieces and nephews know. Didn't you used to draw back then? Because I remember you drawing like pictures of them.
Right, and then plus, well, actually, before that, I don't know if you do cousin Irma,
No.
Grandpa Cleveland's niece, and he helped to raise one of her sons. I don't know, used to keep me when I was in Capital Elementary, and that was all he played was stuff from Motown, and that was my first time hearing the Supremes, but he had the little 45 records, so I didn't know who they was until Mom got that album from his doc and borrowed it. That's when I put names to faces. And then our Uncle Moses, he had that album and some of their other albums.
Okay, but I want to go back because so you drew pictures of him. I thought the pictures were good. So, like, did you like drawing or did you like doing art?
I did at the time.
So why'd you stop?
Ventress Kofa.
So what?
Ventress Kofa.
That's that teacher you said you wasn't gonna name earlier.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so now, so the other thing I want to know, because we talked about growing up in church and whatnot, and so, and several people have mentioned this to me. You seem to know a lot of preachers, like a lot. And so, how do you make all these connections with all these different preachers?
Well, that was something else I had to do after when I joined the cherubim choir because we had Sunday night service, second Sunday night service.
Okay.
And that was, and one of the ministers that would come was a visually impaired man, and I always had to help Grandpa Smith with him. Whenever he came to preach, I would have to help him.
What was his name?
I think he was a Henderson or
Okay.
Williams, but I had to always help Grandpa Smith with him when he had to go to the bathroom. And then as I got older and got in the young adult choir, they would have what we used to call the Four Gospels program. A lot of the young, well, now they're the fathers in ministry now, but a lot of these people like Bishop Wallace, Dr. Robinson over on from Capital Missionary. That's how I got to know them because they would come to Pilgrim Rest to speak, and some I was going on. They were students at Southern when I first went there.
Okay. And so,
as you know, once I was serving, I was working as an armor bearer for Dr. Cyrus. That's how I got to know the rest of them.
okay. And so how long were you doing that?
I did it for 2 years. I did it for 2 years when I was in the service, and 12 years for Pastor Cyrus.
Okay. So who's your favorite preacher?
I would say it's a three-way tie between Dr. Renee Brown, Dr. Marcus Cosby, Dr. Cyrus, and Mr. Antoine George and Nathaniel Green.
You said three-way tie. That's 5 people.
Okay. The honorable mention.
So the last two honorable mention?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So gonna switch gears a little bit. So you said you worked as a substitute teacher, you worked in education, you worked in social services.
Mm-hmm.
And then so you've made some, I guess, you kind of talked about, how things are different versus where they were when we were growing up. And so what do you think, or what do you see as some of the struggles that are going on with our kids, and things that we need to be trying to deal with our kids, to get them on the right path?
Now, people have said this before is, a lack of fathers in the home, but I really feel it goes a little bit deeper than that. Because eventually what I started to discover was that there are situations where moms are not making smart choices in the men that they get involved with. Unfortunately, that's what we have to start at.
Okay. So talk more about that.
There was an agency that I worked for that was a community-based agency. And I noticed the mom, she just did not have respect for men at all. One of the mothers of one of my clients.
Okay.
She didn't have respect for men at all. And it always seemed like that she was depressed and more interested in watching Tyler Perry movies than trying to get her son to improve educational wise. But then she happened to show me a picture of her son's father. And once I saw that, I said, okay, here's where the problem starts.
I'm confused. What was the problem in the picture?
Problem was it was a young man who was a substitute teacher for one of the high schools that gave me all kinds of
So
trouble.
the daddy you taught.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And then there was another case where this kid, his mother was incarcerated. His his grandparents had met up with a similar fate that Uncle Henry
Mhm.
experienced. So the great aunt that was raising him was still traumatized over that. And when this child's probation officer came, I went by his office one day. He sat me down, and and ladies that's gonna watch this, don't get upset. But he told me this: anytime a woman is coming to you, always coming to you, telling you that she don't have any good men in her life, to help her raise her son, look into her background. I hate to say this, he wasn't lying.
And so what type of issues, like in those 2 examples you gave, 2 or 3 examples you gave, like what type of issues did you see the child exhibiting?
The, both boys had no direction. School was just a joke to them. They both were they appeared to be very smart and intelligent, but as far as demonstrating it and as far as classwork, they were years behind their classmates.
So, alright, and so, like, I don't even know the employer or whatever, but what I do wanna understand, like, in them 2 situations, um, and that's not necessarily anything that's uncommon. What I wanted to understand, though, is, like, were there resources being made available, to those kids or to their family to get them the support that they need? Because and I hear what you're saying, but we can't you can't always necessarily go just pick a man off a tree to go attach to that child, and so what type of resources were being provided to that family, to those kids, um, to keep them on a or place them on a positive path. So is that the agency that was what should have been doing that or could have been doing that? Do you think it's more of, we need more community involvement? Um, like is it resources that the school could have been providing?
See, it's a little all of that.
Okay.
Agency should have done much more than they had previously been doing, as and the school could have helped the great aunt out a little bit more. But I think the biggest hang up is that the great aunt and the grandmother of the other young man, and I don't know if this is a generational thing or what, but they were stuck in their minds. I don't want to see him turn out like these other bad boys,
Okay.
because it's like they watch the news and the face of the criminal that they see is a black boy, and they project that their frustrations onto those kids.
Okay. So I'm just a little bit confused on that. Were they not like looking for the resources, or you just felt like they were putting too much energy into I don't want you to turn out like that?
Yeah, too much putting it was too much energy being put into, well, I don't want you to turn out like this or that.
Okay. All right. And so over the span of time that you worked in social services, um, like was experience more of that, or did you have more experiences where you were able to see families turn their situations?
There were a few that I was able to see them turn the situations around after I had to aggressively push them to do certain things.
Okay.
But for the most part, a lot of them, it's like we would close the cases, and then maybe 6 months to a year later, I will see them again, and they were right back into the same hole they were in before.
So I saw where Senator Barrow is some legislation to like completely dismantle DCFS, and I don't. And I've been hearing people talk about it's a good idea, it's a bad idea, and I don't necessarily have an opinion one way or the other. But does it make sense to you that somebody's pushing to dismantle DCFS or
No, just change the dynamics within the system.
such as
Uh, have people in there with mainly with social work degrees in there. There was when I was there, there were people there with other kinds of degrees, and I'm not gonna say which ones, but that was the biggest problem because those individuals did not have the skills to get a mother to understand that you don't need to be smoking this or taking this while you're pregnant.
so you're saying that there are people that don't have the skills and aptitude to do the work that's required to support families?
Right. And that's what contributed to my stress level.
Okay.
'Cause it was I felt like it seemed like every weekend I was headed out to put out, and it was like it was like I was just running on fumes and didn't realize it until that incident in December of 2011 happened.
And what was that?
One of Naya's classmates, her father, stepfather, or whatever, got upset and thought I was about to take his kids from him. He kicked the door in and started calling me all kinds of N
Wait, kick the
words
door in where?
at his
At his
house.
house. Okay.
He kicked the door in, started calling me all kinds of N words. His wife or girlfriend had to push him into the flower bed in order for me to get out of the house. Because when I saw that he was upset, I said, "Well, look, I'm gonna just terminate the visit right now and close the situation." And he just got, for some reason, he just got all riled up over nothing. I think the men that were outside with him was telling him some things. He went to 'cause he was demanding that I leave his house. And so when I got out of the house, and because I had a little silver car at the time,
Okay.
I was trying to get in my car to leave. He grabbed me and pinned me up against his van with a gun in his hand. And and then they had to, once they realized how serious it was, they had to come and get him off of me and hold me until I could get out of there.
So did you like was a police report filed?
A sheriff's report was done.
Was he arrested?
And he was arrested.
Um okay.
This side of the family, I always give them their props as well because during the time that period that I was going between the elementary school and special ed, and she's deceased now, Patty, Deborah, and Carolyn, they were, and their mom and dad, Uncle Alvin and Aunt Lenny, they were very influential in me overcoming those mental hurdles.
So yeah, so my kids have spent time around Bonnie or Althea. They didn't actually get yeah, they didn't spend they haven't I don't think they even met. But I know they didn't meet Uncle Alvin, but they definitely probably didn't get spend much. I'm sorry, they get to spend much time with their mother, but I know that they never met Uncle Alvin. And so I know, when we were kids. Well, actually, let's back up. Let's back up and let's talk about the first time. At least I remember meeting Henry Atkins Jr. was when we were on. I think we were on our way to my mom's house, and Mama pulled up. You may have met him before. That's the first time I remember meeting him. But we just pulled up behind this truck that was parked at the corner of Gus Young and North Foster. Well, North Foster and yeah, Gus Young, North Foster, or Greenwood Street. And so I think that's the first time I can remember knowing that Cleveland Smith was her stepdad. But we had been around his sisters, and so, and I think a couple other people on his side of the family, but we had already been. I just never knew like where the connection came, and then eventually we met him, and saw him several times. And Lenny, we used to spend a lot of time up there. I remember going to spend weekends or spend weeks at a time during the summer. Um, Now, so probably spend more time with Chris and Sean, and Chris and I actually worked together for a period of time. Um, and so, probably have a much bigger family than some people do. And so, yeah, so let's talk about them a little bit more.
Alvin was a World War II veteran. I'm not a person with many words, but I could, go back there and just sit with him, and he would sit with me through some of my silent periods. Yeah, and every now and then he would, talk to me about the importance of doing well in school and whatnot, and making something out of myself. Ain't Lenny or Ain't Sisters, we all call her. She was the total opposite. She was gonna tell you what was on her mind, whether you like it or not. If she didn't like something you was doing, how you were living, she was gonna let you have it. And she was always on us about about doing well in school. And it wasn't until Uncle Alvin's funeral that I came to understand why they were that way. Because Uncle Alvin, he played a role in
Yeah,
the integration of the schools down there, and the establishment of the high school that Rose, Brendan, and graduated from. They called it West Side High back then.
yeah. So I think after his son's funeral, like I remember reading that stuff in his obituary, but I think after his son's funeral, I went back and did some research on him again um, to see a lot of the things that you were saying and how involved he was in a lot of desegregation activities and things going on in Tangipahoa Parish, uh, Independence and 8 Meat. And I think it also to me made sense, like you said, it also made sense to me why his daughters are some people call them mean, but why they're so strict and why they're so strong because of the two people that raised them.
Mhm.
And then if you think about it, whether it's the Atkins side of our family, the Lewis side, or the Parker side, um, all of our grandparents or the people within our grandparents' generation, like they grew up in the country, they grew up in situations where they had to work hard, they grew up in situations where, um, like they were in the midst of segregation. And so I think it's important for us in our generation to kind of uphold that legacy.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think, sometimes when we get together and Daddy will have these conversations with the kids about how blessed they are, for me, it gets frustrating because it goes sideways and I don't really think they understand like where he's coming from. And so there's a lot of things that like our parents and their generation have had to overcome and privileges that they had to now, not necessarily. I'm not saying everybody was like on the front lines, but there are things that we have the ability to take advantage of that they didn't have. Because I can remember when I had my house in Central and Grandpa Lewis and my mother, like I literally remember the last time she came. It was before she went to the hospital last time because she ended up taking sick that night. I don't know if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas we were over there, but that was the last time she came. But I remember, I think it was like Mother's Day weekend or something. She was at my house and was just saying how proud she was and how blessed we were, and to make sure you take care of this. And kind of the same thing with Grandpa Lewis. And so for me, that's important. But I think it's important for my kids and nieces and nephews to understand that, just two generations above them, they have access to things that our grandparents probably would have never imagined. And I distinctly remember Grandpa was riding to my house in Central and he was like, "Boy, where'd you taking me?" And so when I explained it to him, he was like, there is no way in the world I'd have been driving through here when I was your age. None. And that's the crazy thing is because Marcus and my kids like grew up in school districts that their great grandparents could not have attended, like would not have been able to attend. And so like you're talking about West Side, and then I've been doing some research on dating school, and that's a grandfather. Um, and so I've talked to him sometimes about, going to segregated schools. And so it's just, I think on the one hand, like we made a lot of advancements in just a couple of generations, but then there's a lot of things that have kind of gone by the wayside from a structural standpoint in just two generations. What advice, whether it be your nieces and nephews or other kids that you deal with, um, what advice would you give them on how to secure a solid future for themselves, given the world that we live in today?
Start now, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school. Take those years seriously. Take advantage of every opportunity afforded to you because you never know where it can lead up to.
Three different, yeah, three different elementary schools, two different middle schools, one high school, but a high school where you felt like you was being led by people that really didn't care about black people. And then having to deal with those type of things throughout school. And then one thing I didn't talk about, and I don't even think I've ever told my kids about this, but I remember going on vacation one time, and I want to say this was the same vacation. And we went to Atlanta one year, and it was during the Atlanta child murders,
Mhm.
and being just freaked out. And they were like, "Don't leave, don't go nowhere without us, don't get out of our eyesight." And I don't remember if it's the same vacation, but I know one time we went to Six Flags in Atlanta, and it might have been the same vacation. And we were, I don't know if it was like these go karts or one of them little canoe rides, but I just remember, you go up this thing and then you maybe come down to get into the thing, and then there was some white boys standing at the top where they cross over, and they were spitting on us. Um, and so again, not saying that we kind of dealt with the things that our parents or grandparents dealt with, but it's just interesting still. Like we have had moments of dealing with like just overt racism.
And that was the first time I heard the N word. And as a result of hanging around some of my Lewis cousins, I said some things an 8-year-old shouldn't have said because I didn't really understand the significance of the N word. I just knew it was something that was bad. So I repeated what I heard them say, and that got that person away from us.
And so my question is like taking all them different experiences, and I'm gonna tell you why I'm asking. So taking all those different experiences, and then having the opportunity to work with young people, whether through DCFS or work in a school system. Um, do you feel hopeful or do you feel concerned about our future? And I'm gonna tell you on the other end of you answer my question why I asked that. That's like I want you to take into consideration like all the things that we've talked through, about what our grandparents have to overcome, our parents have dealt with, and then the things that we have experienced. Do you feel hopeful or hopeful when it comes to our current generation of young people?
Concern mostly when it comes to this current generation, but but hopeful that there are some that will rise up to the challenge. Overall, I have to say I'm concerned because it's like the family structure is not as revered as it once was.
All right. So this is the reason I asked this. So I've had a couple experiences over the last few days with some young people, um, where so one, and actually two of these are the same individual. One, we were in a setting that N word was used. You know, we have conversations with our kids about using the word, but the N word was used in a setting with people of a different hue. So I pulled the person outside, had a conversation with them. You know, so for me, I just wouldn't say that. I wouldn't be saying it. But when I was like, why would you say that, like, in that company? I know y'all use that word, but why would you say that in that company? And the response was, I don't care about them people. And um, so that's one thing. But then I think two is we're living in a climate where I feel like black people being devalued. I just really feel like black people being devalued. And so in some situations, you know, kids are able to go to schools that move in environments that's just not like it was when we experienced. Now, you know, my kids have said that they've had some experiences and whatnot, and I get that and I respect that. Um, but you know, it's not necessarily a situation where you're having to integrate a school and kids are like, I don't want you here. Or because we didn't talk about this, or like when I was in the Cub Scouts that time, and the kid who I was like calling my best friend, his mother said, okay, go on over to play with your little nigga friend. All right. And you actually came and told us what she had said. And so um, I feel like, you know, sometimes, and again, I'm not even putting it all on this generation, but I think sometimes we've got too comfortable in where we are. Um, and we let things slide and we've gotten too relaxed. And I feel like there's an attack on a lot of the things that have been gained by the previous generations. And so my hope is that, you know, we are building a generation that can sustain, fight, and protect themselves and protect what has been built up for them and not get too comfortable in the privileges that they have. So that's one aspect of it. But then the other aspect is, you know, a lot of what we were talking about with you and the work that you went with DCFS, um, where you know we have families that don't have resources and they don't have access and they don't have the help and the support that they need. Um, and so And I appreciated what you said about people being in those positions, but not having the technical skills to actually do the work. And so that's the piece that also concerns me is because like we got to keep fighting for people that are in need. And I just hope that we have young people that continue to have that passion to fight for kids and fight for families that don't have the resources and support that they need.
This has been another episode of the BRSTEM podcast, Our Children Need Roots and Wings. I want to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again on next week.